Welcome to the Elevate the Vibe podcast, bringing you juicy convos with thought leaders discussing the wild world of parenting.
Taking music lessons and learning to play a musical instrument is so much more than just playing the instrument. It's not about, developing the ability to be able to play music for a living or, even as a hobby. It's more about teaching them to appreciate the process and what it takes to get good at something and appreciate the steps, no matter how slow they're progressing, but developing that work ethic, which would translate to everything else in life.
What up, Vibe Hive? It's your favorite day of the week. It's Wednesday, which means it's time for a new Elevate the Vibe podcast. I'm your host, Jason Berlin, and with me is the beautiful co-host of mine that is your favorite with those sweet, sweet, subtle, supple pipes, Katie Berlin.
Welcome to another episode of Elevate the Vibe. This week we have our dear friend Mike Gambone joining us.
Mike is one of my oldest, dearest friends. To say he's a best friend is an understatement, really. We're like bros. He's just one of the most inspirational cats that I've ever had the pleasure of knowing. He's an incredibly gifted musician. He's a drummer, he's a piano player, and he's always been one of my biggest inspirations.
It's amazing to see him turn his passion into his craft. It's like his passion for drumming, his love for it. That's how you two connected. That's how you built the bond that you have. Like you're saying, it's almost brotherly. And it's amazing to see that also turn into what he's able to do with his time all day, every day. It's amazing.
Mike Gambone is an educator, performer, multi-instrumentalist. He studied music for 25 plus years and experienced firsthand what it takes to be a good musician. He got a degree in jazz performance from Towson University in 2004 and toured full-time with the incredible band, The Bridge. Let's welcome Mike to the show. Well, hello, Mike Gambone. Welcome to the Elevate the Vibe podcast. Why don't you introduce yourself to the Vibe Hive audience, if you will?
Well, first of all, thank you guys for having me on here. Seriously, it's an honor and a pleasure to be on here to talk about my experiences as a musician, as a teacher. As far as music goes, I started playing drums when I was 12 years old. And I was very fortunate that I have a father who is a musician and just so happened to know the best drum teacher in town. And he signed me up for lessons with him because the only way my dad was going to buy me a drum set was if I took lessons and demonstrated that I was serious about it. And the rest is history. I mean, the teacher I had from day one, not only was he an amazing teacher, but mentor and an incredible player. One of those guys that, you want to work for, you want to show up prepared for your lessons week after week. And it was the perfect thing for me at that time in my life because I was kind of lost. I went through the whole, experimenting with different sports, playing baseball, basketball, soccer, and all the stuff that kids do. And eventually you reach a point where it's like, either you're into that sort of thing or not. And I realized I wasn't athletic, wasn't interested in athletics. And drums came to me at the perfect time, and a lot of it had to do with the fact that I had just started really getting into music on my own. And believe it or not, I have MTV to thank for that. I wonder how many people in the audience even remember MTV when it actually showed music.
Let's say, what's MTV? I've heard of it.
Most people know it as like a reality TV.
I've heard of that too.
Wait, nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, disclaimer. There is nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely not. But it wasn't the reality TV aspect of MTV that got me into playing music. It was watching the videos, Metallica, Nirvana, Pearl Jam. And I realized that's what I wanted to do. And, I got to study with the best drum teacher around. And I was fortunate to have the support from my parents to pursue it. And it just became my life. It was all consuming from that point on.
It's interesting how you talk about sports and music together. And I always felt like, music, yes, it's kind of an individual thing when you start. You got to practice hard, but then, you get into different bands, and then it's more of like a group mentality of everyone working together for a common good. So it kind of brings that sort of feel into your life, where maybe you were like, felt like a little more of a loner. Like, I felt a little bit more of a loner, but I also longed for a sense of community. And then getting into a band, you're working together for that common goal.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing when you get to experience that. It teaches you so much about teamwork, the same way that playing sports would, but it's a different thing altogether, but the same kind of principle applies. You work together as a team for a common goal, and everybody needs to be held accountable. And you want to make sure that you do the best you can to not let your other bandmates down, and just having people in your life that you share a common interest in that you can grow with is so important. And I was very fortunate to find that in music. I found a group of guys about a year after I started taking drum lessons. Found a group of guys that were a little bit older than me who wanted to start a band, and started a band, and that was my group all the way through high school. Yeah.
I want to go back a little bit. So the two of you have a lot of history together. You have known each other for many years, and you can say that music actually brought you together.
Yeah, it's true.
I want to hear a little bit about that time in your life when the two of you met, how your relationship formed, and then Mike, since then, what your progression has been like in your career as well, because you've had a pretty cool music career. So I want to make sure we don't like skim over that at all into what you're doing now.
Hey, you want to start? You want me to start?
I was going to say, do you want my side of this? Okay, so Mike and I were both enrolled in the marching band program at Towson University, and we were both playing snare drum at the same time. And I distinctively remember a time where, we were having some rehearsals, and I said, hey man, check out this beat that I just figured out, where it was like, do 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 do, and it was a simple beat, and it was kind of like a metric modulation sort of sense, and it was based on a group that we both liked. Well, I didn't know that we both liked at the time, called Dream Theater.
Yes, sir.
And so Dream Theater was a huge influence for me, and I showed Mike this groove that I knew, and he's like, oh yeah, I heard that. And so just from something small like that, a little connective tissue, Mike and I realized we were like on the same page, and then started hanging out, and we were then trading off drum licks in band classes, and then practicing together all the time. Because for a lot of people, they don't understand that when you're in a marching band, you don't just play at halftime. You are practicing for 5-6 hours a day, every day, for weeks and weeks to prepare for this time, and you form bonds with your friends. They become friends whether you like them or not. You become friends with these people that you spend hours and hours with, perfecting your craft. And so Mike and I spent hours and hours in practice rooms working on rudiments and
all the nerdy stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's that part of my life was amazing for so many reasons. And I think about when I went to college, what my aspirations were. And my aspirations were to become the best drummer I can be. And in order to pursue playing drums in college, you had to major in jazz performance. There was no rock drumming major unless you want to go to Berkeley and spend, $40,000 a year, which that wasn't happening. So I really loved jazz, but like the stuff that I really loved to work on was the more like progressive rock, the stuff that Jason's talking about with, Dream Theater, and then like the crazy fusion music. And I didn't really have anybody when I first got to Towson. There was no other drummers that were really into the stuff that I was into. And my sophomore year, when Jason shows up, he's into all the stuff that I liked. And I'm like, oh, this guy's awesome. And he can play. I'm like, this is exactly what I need, because having that camaraderie and that almost like, friendly competition too is so healthy. And I remember distinctively, like it was yesterday, the first time you and I, had a little drum session in the practice room. You had your big, I think, was that when you had the green Yamaha stage custom beast? Yeah. And you and I sat down, started trading licks, and I tried to play like a double bass thing, which that was like a no-no at jazz school. You don't play double bass, but that's something that I was into. And then you answered my little double bass lick with your own, and it was much better than mine.
Oh, come on.
And I was like, wow, I got to practice. I got to practice a lot. And it was a great feeling because, again, having that friendly competition is so healthy when you're trying to push yourself to be the best you can be. And yeah, Jason and I hit it off right away. And I'm very, very proud to say he's been one of my closest friends ever since.
And then as time evolved, now like after school, we want to hear a little bit about what your life was like post college, how your career has molded itself along the way.
Out of college, I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to do. I knew I wanted to play music for a living, but I wasn't exactly sure how to do it because I hadn't set myself up to be able to do it just yet. I didn't have like 5 gigs a week and, I didn't have steady work just yet. So I was fortunate to be getting calls to sub for my old drum teacher, the guy I was talking about before, Frank Russo. He was throwing me a bunch of gigs, but it wasn't enough for me to like move out of my dad's basement and get an apartment or anything. So I was looking into going to get a graduate degree because I thought that might buy me some time and also allow me to make some new connections that could lead to more work. So I was looking for a school that would have a TA position available because I didn't want to have a bunch of student debt when I graduated. And I came across the University of Miami and reached out to the percussion director there, sent him an audition packet, and he got back in touch with me and said that, they already have a guy filling the TA position there. But the following year, he'd be graduating and he would love to have me come down and audition in person. And I was like, cool, yeah, so let me know. So it was during the course of that year that I joined a touring band called The Bridge. We were kind of in the jam band scene, and they were already kind of established regionally. They had a fan base in Maryland and some of the surrounding states. And it was really intriguing to me to like join a jam band because it fuses a lot of styles that I was really into. It's rock, it's funk, it's jazz, but it's also this other stuff that I wasn't really into. They were very much, all the guys in the band were very much into Grateful Dead and Little Feat and these bands that I had never really listened to before. So it was a great opportunity for me to get some schooling, learn about some new music, and grow with these guys. And that's exactly what we did for the next 7 years. We toured 200 plus days out of the year all across the country. Went abroad a couple times and lived the touring lifestyle, which was something that I always wanted to do. I always aspired to just get that experience, getting out there, seeing the world, doing what I love. And during that time, I tried to also maintain like a steady like teaching schedule back home, which was really impossible because I was gone like 200 days out of the year. But I had a handful of students that stuck with me through all of that. And when I was home, I would work with them, and it was great. I was out there living the dream, and met my beautiful wife along the way. And here I am, a full-time musician, wife, and now 3 kids.
When you're growing up, I want to think about like the mental space, not necessarily that you're in, but your parents may be in. So as kids, all of us are like, this is what I want to be when I grow up. You're a kid and you're like, I want to be a veterinarian. I want to be an astronaut. I want to be a professional volleyball player. And then time goes on and these ideas begin to cement themselves a little bit more into reality. So when you're a child and then you're starting to say like, I want to be a musician. I actually want to be a musician. I can imagine that some parents, maybe not all parents, but some parents are like, yeah, that's not a real job. You need to get like a degree in a real field. I could see a lot of kids coming up against that, like parents just saying like, no. And Mike, you were saying your dad was very supportive. He was a musician, so he understood this. What was that dynamic like when you shared with your dad, like, hey, I want to do this as my career?
Well, he was very stern in saying, if you're going to play drums, you're going to take lessons. I remember we were driving somewhere. I was in the backseat of our Dodge minivan. And I said, Dad, I want to learn to play drums. He's like, well, you're going to take lessons. I'm like, okay, cool. Whatever you say, I'll do it. And, I was all about it because I knew that if I took lessons, that will mean one day I'll get that drum set and be able to annoy my parents around the clock. I'd be able to do what I love to do. So, yeah, I had the full support of my dad. And he, being a musician himself, he was in contact with some of the best musicians in the area. So that's why he was able to connect me with the best drum teacher in the area.
And when you decided, like, this is what I want to major in, was there ever any pushback, or was it like, yeah, go ahead, go for it?
No. Yeah. They knew I was all in at that point. By the time I was auditioning, I actually, you know what? Now I think back to it, I only auditioned at Towson. I didn't audition at any other school. So yeah, my dad, he really liked the idea of me going to Towson, and I really liked the idea of going to Towson. They had a good reputation. They weren't too far from home. I wasn't necessarily ready to just move out to, like LA and be at the Musicians Institute or anything like that. There's a part of me that thought about it, but I just wasn't ready to be that far away from home just yet.
Like, I could imagine that there comes a time, let's say that you're a young person and you're thinking, like, what do I want to do with my life? And maybe you have a strong conviction where you're feeling, I want to play music. Like, this is what I want to do. But you are maybe nervous or afraid to share that with your parents because they maybe made crazy sacrifices in their lives to get you to a certain place, and they're thinking like, no, you're going to go to school to be an engineer. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? With the students that you have and just the variety of maybe different parents that you come across, do you ever see parents that kind of think like, okay, I'm just indulging my child, I don't think this is going to go anywhere, and they're not taking it seriously, but you can tell that their child has something really special that should continue to be nurtured?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm fortunate in that my line of work, being a private, music instructor, most of the parents that I come across, like they get it. Like they understand the importance of the arts and nurturing like that, the talent of music. If their kid shows interest, you know, they're sending them to take private lessons because they want their kid to have the best shot at developing that skill and really getting in touch with that passion of theirs. The only like issues I come across sometimes are, well, there's two main ones. One is, the student that claims they want to learn to play music, but they're more in love with the idea and not the actual work that goes with it. And some of that is the teacher too, right? Like some students are gonna, respond to a certain style of teaching that other students will not. And I had to figure that out as a teacher. Like, okay, so the way that I learned and the way that I responded to the lessons that I took isn't necessarily going to be the way to teach every student. So you got to, like, as a teacher, you got to cater to each student's learning style. But at the end of the day, it's up to the student to put in the work, and it's their responsibility. But sometimes, parents can push them a little bit more to put in the work to prepare for the lessons. Because a lot of kids, it's so easy to get sucked into just watching like YouTube videos or they're playing video games or watching YouTube videos of people playing video games. So many distractions now. But I'm fortunate in that most of the parents that come across, they get it. They really do. They're on board with their kids wanting to pursue playing music and taking lessons and everything that comes with that.
I could definitely see the like maybe more Gen Z group of like kids right now, seeing the availability of huge notoriety from overnight success, like quote unquote overnight success that happens very quickly for like YouTube stars or like TikTok stars. And I could see kids feeling anxious, like, I just want to get to that place. Like you're saying, they don't necessarily want to put in the work. They're just like, I just want to get to that outcome. But the work behind it is like, yeah, I'm not really interested in that aspect of it. I just want to get to that, insta fame kind of situation.
I know it's fascinating. You touched on something that we're dealing with in our household right now, like literally just the other day. Exact same thing what you're talking about. We were witnessing that happen real time with one of ours. And the fame, the stardom, the attention, all that. It's no different, than when I was a kid looking up to like Lars Ulrich from Metallica and the fame that they experienced as a band. And I would fantasize about maybe one day being in a band like that, but you don't realize all the pressure that comes with that. It's not all fun and games, because you have people scrutinizing everything that you do. And nowadays it's so easy to scrutinize and insult people online that you got to have some really thick skin to deal with that. And the fame aspect, it's great, but it comes with a price, and most kids don't understand that it can be a heavy price. But yeah, it's interesting you brought that up. Literally yesterday we were dealing with that same thing here.
Well, and it's part of the journey, like, like you're saying, building up the thick skin. When you're a young person and you see a certain outcome, you kind of, I mean, not even as a young person, like somebody my age, maybe I'm young to a 90-year-old, but like, you know what I mean? You just want to get there. You just want to get to that end goal. But it's all of the steps along the way. It's that total journey along the way that builds you to that end goal. And it's like forcing yourself to be in difficult situations, forcing yourself to put time in aspects of your craft that are frustrating and you don't want to do it, but that's like what builds the resistance. So when you're teaching and you're with these students, what are ways that you're able to motivate them to get past those places?
First and foremost, the kids have to be interested in music. So I always try to find out, what kind of music do you really enjoy listening to? What is something that, you like putting on and jamming out to? Because you have to be interested in music and listening to music in order to play it, especially an instrument like the drums. So finding out what they're interested in and then kind of going from there and kind of catering the lessons around what their interests are. Because if they can see like a real goal that they can reach and be able to play along with their favorite bands, that's very motivating. So not just having it be exercises and drills to work on just for the sake of doing it, but giving them something to work towards that excites them.
I feel like for you and I, it was Green Day, Offspring, and Metallica that it was like, those were easy enough that we could, map out the grooves a little bit. And then with imitation comes innovation. So, we start somewhere basic, and then all of a sudden, I know in my case, I started getting bored of those bands and moving on to Rush, Dream Theater, and stuff that was then got me in the giant rabbit hole of something extremely difficult. So I guess this could also like translates to life too, because you're learning a discipline. It's like kids are learning something that, when you can adapt it to like mathematics or English or something where you just have to buckle down and like sit there and practice the same thing over and over. And you figure out that discipline of just setting aside time and just grinding these ideas in your head, then you can take those skills on to bigger and better things.
Absolutely. Yeah, taking music lessons and learning to play a musical instrument is so much more than just playing the instrument. It's not about, developing the ability to be able to, play music for a living or, even as a hobby. I feel like most students, they're not going to end up playing music for a living. So it's more about teaching them to appreciate the process and what it takes to get good at something, and appreciate the steps, no matter how slow they're progressing, but developing that work ethic, which would translate to everything else in life. You know.
There's so many young people where they gravitate towards music because everyone gravitates towards it. It's definitely universal. And you can become very attached to like singers, songwriters, the emotions there. And it can become therapeutic in that way. Like it's a release for many people. Music
Mm-hmm.
is a release. It's a way for them to express emotions that they may not have been able to like get out on their own, and it really can be like a safe place for kids. So
Mm-hmm.
if you have students that are highly interested, you maybe know it's not going to be their career, but you can see that this is something that is like saving them in a way. It's what they need in the moment now. Do you approach teaching those kids in a different way than you would someone that like definitely they want to do this as their career?
Yeah. So young kids can have a tough time navigating themselves through life and finding where they fit in, because there's so much pressure to like fit in a certain way. And when you have those students that really need that thing to latch onto, to feel some sense of purpose, um, I do everything in my power to find that approach that will help them get what they need out of music and the process of learning about music. It's not about, opening up a book with a bunch of exercises in it and say, okay, read these and, see you next week. It's not about that. It's got to be so much more than that. And finding whatever excites them and makes them feel good, gets them to that happy place, and focusing on that is what I find is the most important thing.
Have you noticed in the past year, or specifically in 2020, with just the change of in-person lessons versus like virtual lessons, have you noticed a shift in how kids respond if it's not in person versus like Zoom lessons?
Yeah, yeah, it's so much easier for a kid to like be playing video games while appearing to be engaged in the lesson. Meanwhile, they're like communicating with their friends and online.
Really? Oh, they're doing that during lessons? Oh, these kids.
Well,
Oh,
I don't feel all that bad. I feel bad for all the teachers who are teaching like, full on band class, and they have to keep tabs on like 30 different kids. And yeah, I've heard some stories about band directors and what they've gone through over the past year. And it's my situation. It's actually really helped me kind of re-examine like how I teach, why I teach it. And it's helped me to refine just my whole approach, because you can't teach the same way virtually you can in person. It's forced me to just try a lot of different things to be as effective as I possibly can be in the virtual kind of environment. It definitely came with its challenges for sure, but I knew that I had to, just make some adjustments and experiment with different ways of approaching the lessons to make them fun, and productive, and just as enjoyable as the in-person lessons. And it's definitely helped me to step up my game for sure.
If there are parents who have kids where the kids are maybe showing interest or showing signs that they could potentially want to take a music class, maybe they're finding an affinity towards a certain instrument, how would you guide a parent to say it's worthwhile for you to invest in a music class at this point versus like your kid just is maybe has like a phase for several months and they're gonna kind of be past that?
Yeah. I give every student a chance to like show that it's really something they want to dedicate themselves to. And I applaud all the parents that, even if they don't really see their kids having a real interest in music, at least giving them a try, giving it a try to have them, try some music lessons and see if it is something that they, that they really take to. But you do reach that point as a teacher where if a student is going to put in the time, if it's really something that interests them. I love hanging out and just like talking music and hanging with all these kids, all ages. I teach from 3 years old to even have a 55-year-old now. So I enjoy hanging out with all of them. But at the end of the day, I'm being paid to, for a certain job to provide them with music lessons that, really at the end of the day, the lessons themselves don't amount to anything if they don't go home and practice the material. So if it becomes apparent that they're just here for the hang and not really interested in putting in the work, I'll let the parents know. I'll be honest with them. And every single one of them, whenever I've had to do that, they've been very appreciative of my honesty. Because it's not like I'm trying to say your kid isn't good enough, or it's more so, okay, it's great that your kid gave this a try, but maybe their interest is elsewhere. And I think as parents, you want to give your kids as many opportunities as possible to try different things, just to see what sticks and what really like intrinsically motivates them. I was just very lucky to strike gold with my first attempt. I talked to people, musician friends of mine who started out on one instrument and went to like 3 different instruments before they found the one, and I lucked out. I found it right away.
Well, and as parents, you want to be able to do that for your child, but at the same time, like some of these instruments are expensive. And it's not always easy to maybe find a place or time for them to practice. It's like, okay, well, I want to try the tuba, and it's like, or I want to try the standing bass drum. Or even the drums. Like these are big instruments, and it's like, okay, well, if I buy you that $1,500 violin, are you really going to go for it? And it's hard to figure out like when to press the gas and when to press the brakes as parents. Like it's not an easy decision to make.
No, certainly not. I think about how much my craft, playing drums and even playing some piano, how much that costs. But I talked to some friends of mine who have kids that play hockey.
Oh, yeah.
We were just having this conversation the other day. Yeah.
I mean, you want to talk about a lot of money.
Well, then they grow out of their equipment every year too, so you got to re-up.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, having the money, having the space for them to be able to explore whatever it is they're trying to work on. Yeah, no doubt. I was very fortunate. I had a lot of forces working with me to allow me to make a bunch of noise and develop that skill. But yeah, as parents, you're always trying to figure out what you can do to help your kids succeed in whatever it is they want to do. And it's unfortunate if finances become an issue. You never want it to be that way, but that is a reality. The one thing nowadays that's somewhat helpful with that is if you do spend a bunch of money on something that's stretching your bank account a little bit, if it proves that your kid isn't into it, just put it up on Facebook Marketplace and ta-da!
Thanks, Zuck.
You couldn't do that 20 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can definitely be pretty resourceful nowadays too. Like you could always buy something used. Like we do have access to
and there's Music and Arts Center has entry level violins. You don't have to get the Stradivarius right off the bat. You can work up to that.
Well, and also kids can like kind of check out lessons on different platforms as well to see what's out there. And like
we didn't have YouTube lessons growing up, and now and Mike, I'm sure you'll speak to this in a minute, there's online curriculums for instruments all over the place. One extremely amazing one I know on Udemy that will help kids learn the skills that they need to master an instrument just even from their own home.
It's amazing if kids would use it for that more than the other stuff. There's just a wealth of knowledge at their fingertips, and just taking advantage of that. And yeah, you and I wanted to watch drum videos. We had to buy the VHS tapes, the DCI VHS tapes, and
I could only afford one. I only had Back to Basics by Dave Weckl. I never got to the next step because I couldn't afford the second one. That was like 25
It's all
years
you need.
ago.
It's all you need.
All I know are the basics, though. But
That's just going to keep you working, though.
Yes.
Nobody wants the flashy stuff.
Yeah, nobody wants that stuff.
Leave that to Weckl.
If parents want to begin to like traverse this terrain and figure out, okay, how do I, find an instructor that's reputable, that has like the right background? What are different like facets of somebody's accreditation that a parent should look for?
Well, word of mouth, talking to people who have firsthand experience. Yeah, that's another thing that now you have reviews you can see online. I mean, you don't always know for sure if the reviews aren't from like their family members or something, just trying to make them look good. But yeah, I think most parents don't really know what to look for other than a person who doesn't seem like they're creepy and they have some experience, whether it's they got degrees or experience, just performing or just hearing from other people that they're a reputable instructor. It's just like anything else you don't really know about. Like when I go to buy something off Amazon, I really don't know anything about. I look at the reviews and maybe even ask around to some smart friends who have used a certain product and get their opinion on it. So yeah, if you can get enough people's opinions who have firsthand experience with that person, and also seeing what you can find out about them online. And you'll know too, like pretty much every student, every kid who comes here for lessons, their parents sit in the first few lessons, and I encourage that. So their parents, learn to like trust my process and what I do, because it's their kids, and they want to know that their kids are safe and are getting good instruction, and that their money is going towards something that's really worth it. So yeah, seeing it firsthand would be helpful too.
Now, if there is a parent listening or anyone listening, themselves that might be interested in learning more about drumming, Jason gave you that little slick plug there, but I want you to also share about your course that you offer.
That's so nice of you guys. So my course, it's on Udemy. If you're not familiar with it, Udemy. It's a site where you can take a course in pretty much anything, whether you want to learn play drums or basket weaving. Is course for just about everything. So it's on there. So if you go on there and just search Mike G's drum set crash course, you'll see I have 2 parts on there. There's part 1, part 2. And yeah, they're on there for purchase. And
it's an extensive course.
Yeah, so part 1 has 22 lessons. And each lesson, is like a 6 to 10 minute video lesson of me breaking down the material, and I talk about the music notation, learning how to read music starting from square one. And then there's MP3 files that come with each lesson, so you can actually listen to the different examples and hear what it's supposed to sound like. Because when you put something online for people to learn from, you want to make sure you're like covering all your bases, like the different learning styles. Some people love the idea of seeing notes on a page, and they really connect with just that visual aspect. Other people like just hearing it. Some people can just hear something and know, okay, that's what it's supposed to sound like. And some people like both, they're visual and auditory. So yeah, each lesson is 6 to 10 minutes, and you get the music notation that you can print out with it. You get MP3 files, and it starts from square one. The first lesson is just basic stick technique, and part 1 goes up through it's all still pretty basic stuff. It doesn't get advanced. Part 2 is more like intermediate stuff. And my plan was eventually do a part 3 and get into some more advanced stuff, but one day.
You're going to have Jason come in for like a little cameo on that.
Yeah. Demonstrating his sick double bass chops.
Yeah, we're going to do some hybrid rudiments today. Yeah. It's a pat of flat fives.
If you had to leave the audience with a key takeaway, from perspective as a parent, what is something that you would want to impart on them?
giving your kids as many opportunities as possible to find the thing that they're really drawn towards, because success, right? It's like talent meets like opportunity. You have this thing that you're really good at, but you don't know it yet. So you got to find that. So having the opportunities to like find whatever that thing is. So yeah, just being open to allowing your kids to try different things until they really find that thing that they're meant to do. Because that can mean you're signing them up for a lifetime of joy and happiness and fulfillment,
Are there any resources that you think are valuable that you would want to leave the audience with?
Oh, well, Elevate the Vibe, if you haven't heard of it.
I've heard of it.
Honestly, like I think as far as the resources that I've checked out in recent years, your podcast has been amazing. I've listened to a few different episodes, especially there was one about like arts, the arts, like getting kids, interested in art and like kind of nurturing that thing. I found that fascinating. We signed our kids up for a class called Music Together, and they have instructors that run a class of like 12 kids, all age like infant to like toddler age, and they play music, sing songs, and pass out different percussion instruments for them to play. It's a great way to get your kids, into music and even learn some stuff about music too. They incorporate some music theory, believe it or not. I don't know if many of the kids are really soaking that aspect up, but it's there for the ones that are, that are interested.
And where can everyone find you if they wanted to reach out, maybe dabble in a virtual class if they're not located in Maryland?
Well, I have like a Google business page. There's also MikeGamboneDrums.com. I am on Instagram and Facebook. Instagram is Gbone0623 is my handle. And then Facebook, you can find me on Facebook just by searching my name. I got like my personal page, and then I have my business page you can find as well.
Right on. Well, Mike, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on our show. You're an incredible friend of mine and just one of the most inspirational drummers I've ever met. Always keep me going. And the fact that you are now devoting your life to helping the kids, pushing the kids forward, and still maintaining gigs and everything, like you're really just living that full 360 lifestyle of a professional drummer. And I look up to that, and I just really appreciate your time with us and, imparting some of your wisdom on us.
I appreciate the opportunity to come on here and talk with you guys and impart whatever little wisdom I have to impart.
If these two were in person right now, they would be making out and giving each other a hug.
I don't know about all that. We'd have the drumsticks.
It's a love fest.
Good thing we live on opposite coasts.
Thank goodness. Yeah. All right, man. Well, thanks again for spending time with us to help elevate the vibe, and we'll catch up with you again.
Sounds great. Love you guys. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Hey there, Vibe Hive babes. If this podcast has brought you any value, please rate and review on your favorite listening platform. And if you're feeling really generous, share with a friend. Visit us at elevatethevibe.co for show notes on this episode and previous episodes. This podcast is intended to educate, entertain, and inspire. It is not intended to diagnose, treat, or substitute for professional medical advice. Please consult your healthcare provider with any questions you may have. And as always, thank you for joining us to elevate the vibe.